So good evening, folks. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Kat McGregor, and on behalf of the Farm Advisory Service, I'm here with my colleague Kathleen Gunn to welcome you along to tonight's meeting, which is called Buzzing About Bees. I'm delighted we have Luis Molero with us, who is the lead bee inspector at the Scottish Government, and his deputy Claire Gill, who's going to be taking us through tonight's presentation. Just before I hand you over to them, folks, there's just a couple of bits and pieces I want to run through. Tonight's meeting, we want it to be as beneficial as we possibly can to you all. So if you have any questions throughout the evening, don't sit in silence, folks. Please do ask your questions. There's a couple of ways that you can do this. So on your taskbar of your Zoom screen that you're looking at, you'll see that you have an option to either chat or QA. So you can use any of these two options to present questions. If you use the chat function, you have the option to show your question to everybody that's on tonight's call, or you can direct it just at myself or Kathleen by using the drop-down arrow and selecting our names. What we'll do is we'll collate all the questions and we will ask them as we're going along if we see fit, or we'll wait until the very end of the Q&A session at the end. Of course, the other way that you can ask questions, folks, is by coming off mute and asking your question yourself. We would try to discourage this during the presentation, folks, and leave that to the end if you do want to speak. So yeah, alternatively, say pop it in the chat, we'll collate it and we'll present it to our speakers at the end. So I think that's really all the housekeeping that we have. So thanks again for joining us. We have a couple of more people that are just joining a wee bit later. So Kathleen's just going to let them into the meeting. And what I will do now, folks, I'm just going to share my screen out and hand you over to our speakers for this evening. So Luis, are you able to come off of mute for us? There we go. So folks, I think I'm going to be handing over to Luis, who's going to be kick-starting the meeting for us.
Hello everyone, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yep. And I hope everyone can see the screen okay? Yep. Okay, Luis, over to you then. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep, so no problem, Kat. Thank you so much. Kat, would you like me to try to, again, just to share my screen and see if it works? And might be a bit easier. If we have problems, we go back to you sharing the screen.
No problem at all.
Just very quickly and see if it works.
Yep, that seems to be working fine.
Let me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, can see your screen, Luis.
Okay. I think that, sorry everyone that you cannot see me, but that's perfect. So sorry everybody that you cannot see me. We have been having some problems with the bandwidth, and it seems to be that every time that we turn on my camera, we are losing the sound. So yeah, sorry for that. But no, thank you so much everybody for attending, and thank you, Kat, for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you. So yeah, thank you everybody. My name is Luis Molero. As Kat has said, I'm the lead bee inspector for the Scottish Government. And my colleague Claire Gill is with us as well. So I'll let, if Claire can come out of the on mute, I will let Claire introduce herself as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Claire. I'll just give you a wee bit.
That might not be working so well, so no.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Just to give you a wee bit of background on me. So I have worked with SGRPID, otherwise known as the department, in the Golspie office for, it'll be 10 years this year. So during that time, I've done a lot of kind of croft related work to do with the crofting grant scheme and small farms grant scheme and croft regulatory work. Other agricultural stuff as an agricultural officer. I've also been a bee inspector seasonally for I think 7 or 8 years now, but over the last couple of years I've had more involvement in that side. And just earlier this year, I took on the role as the deputy lead. So I'm kind of working with Luis kind of all the time now, kind of pretty much full-time bees. So loving it so far, but still doing the odd bit of Golspie work here and there in the winter time. So that's me.
Thanks, Claire. So Luis, you're still on mute. Luis, are you able to take yourself off of mute? There we go.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I have tried. Yeah. Okay. This is not going well with IT today. Sorry very much, everybody. So yeah, just a bit of background about myself. So I'm relatively new into the post. I started to work for the Scottish Government as lead bee inspector in August 2019. So last year was my first full season as a lead bee inspector. I'll tell you a bit more as we go along about the work that we are trying to do. My background is as a vet. I came here I'm Spanish, by the way. I hope that you decide to find my accent delightful. But if there is anything that is not clear, please just let me know. So yeah, I came 17 years ago here to Scotland. Originally was going to be for 3 months, and here we are 17 years later. And my background is I have been working for different departments of the government as a veterinarian. But in 2019, the opportunity to work for the Scottish Government as the lead bee inspector came along. Yeah, and so far no regrets, and it has been fantastic. So this is a wee bit of an odd one for us. This is a presentation and a talk that we usually don't do. We do a lot of evening talks during the winter, but most of them is related to the work that we do in bee health and disease prevention and bee management. So when Kat talked to us, my understanding is that most of you are in the crofting community and that the majority of you might not have beekeeping experience. Although there might be a few of you that, according to Kat, might have been keeping bees for quite a while. So the way that I have pitched the presentation is just very, very rough, very touching base with what we do in honeybees in Scotland, about beekeeping in Scotland, and what to do if you are thinking about getting started with bees. I hope that you find it interesting. I'm going to struggle to keep it to 45 minutes. I'm already ranting too much, but please feel free to ask any questions as we go along. Also, just very, very quickly, obviously, if you have any questions or you want to get in touch with me after the presentation, please feel free to get in touch with us. That's the email address for our team. There is an underscore between bees and mailbox. So please just get in touch at any time. So just a bit about the Scottish Government Honeybee Health Team before we start with the interesting thing of bees. We are, Scottish Government has their own team, Honeybee Health team. Some people think that we are part of the National Bee Unit, that is the team responsible for honeybee health in England and Wales, but bee health is devolved in Scotland. So as I was saying, I just took over the team in 2019, and we are a very small but very dynamic, very proactive team that I think that we worked really well. So since I took over, we have been trying to do quite a bit of work in trying to restructure the team. When I took over, we had some problems with resources. Basically, we were reduced to 4 bee inspectors. So in the year and a half that I have been, we have managed to build the team and divide, create a policy team and a delivery team. So the policy team basically is doing all the policy work in terms of bee health, and the delivery team is the one that Claire is helping me with the leading, and it's basically about what people think that most people think that we do all the time. That is about the inspection of bees. So the work that we do and ways of we're trying to do in the Scottish Government, so our objective is to try to achieve a sustainable and healthy populations of honeybees for pollination and honey production in Scotland. And we try to do that by the implementation of the Scottish honeybee health strategy. I have included there the link. You can find it in the Scottish Government web pages. The honeybee health strategy basically has 4 pillars. And the 4 pillars is based in education, science and research, communication, surveillance, diagnosis, and biosecurity. So what does it really mean? So in terms of education, what it means is that we do a program of talks, we do bee health days and training days. We try to educate the beekeeping community in how to manage honeybees and to have healthy bees. Science of research, we do a lot of funding. We work very closely with SASA, and basically we try to use the science to underpin every decision that we make in terms of honeybee health. Communication is very important, so obviously we need to communicate with all the beekeepers and with the beekeeping community. So that is key for us in terms of achieving our objectives. And surveillance, diagnosis, and biosecurity. So as I was saying, that is in reality what most people think that we do when they think about the bee inspectors, that's the work that we do inspecting bees. So just some examples of the policy work that we do. Obviously, we have been really busy developing the honeybee health strategy. We are currently in the process of reviewing it, and we are going to publish a new 10-year strategy. With COVID, we have been really busy as well, providing guidance of beekeepers and the beekeeping community on how the rules affected them. Brexit has changed many of the rules in terms of importation of bees and honey. So we have had to do new policies and new regulations. And in terms of delivery, just some of the work that we do. So there are 2 notifiable diseases of honeybees in Scotland. That are European fall brood and American fall brood. And we have 3 reportable and notifiable pests in Scotland as well. So a lot of the work that we do is to try to control or eradicate these diseases and try to avoid the importation of pests into Scotland. So when people think about us, the bee inspectors, most people think that our job is about inspecting bees, but obviously that is only part of what we do. That's a very short season, usually start from the beginning of May, and we finish inspecting bees around the end of August. And the bee inspections, basically what we're trying to do is we're looking for bee diseases. In the majority, those 2 that I have spoken about, European fall brood and American fall brood. There is a number of ways that you can see us if you are keeping bees. And the first one, of course, is, I'll talk about it a bit later on, but anybody that suspect that might have European or American fall brood has the legal obligation to call us. And we try to go and try to help you with the eradication of the disease. But furthermore, like with any other eradication programs, and once that we find disease, what we try to do is to find all the contacts and all the possible spread of the disease.
Luis,
so that's basically most of the work that
but
we do during the summer. But yeah, that's just yes.
Luis, we can see your main slide and your next slide, but unfortunately, some people that are on smaller screens are struggling to see your slide because it's showing your present slide and your next slide. Are you able to change the settings of your presentation, Luis, so it just shows the slide that you're talking on?
Okay, that is not how it should be. Sorry for that.
That's okay. No problem.
So it should be. Sorry, I wasn't aware that was happening.
That's okay. That's okay. I pinged you a message, but I know you were chatting.
Is that working better now?
Just waiting on it coming up on the screen. Yes, that's much
Is that better
better.
now?
Much better. Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry for that. So, okay, technology is being a problem today. So, well, let's see if this now decides to move. Okay, perfect. So, the interesting bit. So, what that's a very brief introduction to the bee health team and what we do. And another thing that I was going to say, we are trying to cover quite a lot. Probably each of these slides that we are putting are a full topic on themselves. So we do a full presentation in the evenings for the associations where we talk about the work that we do in the bee health team and the Scottish Government. So I have tried to condense that in 3 slides. And equally, a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking, like honey production or how to start on beekeeping, on themselves are presentations that we do on their own, and they are for an hour and a half. So yeah, it's going to be a very rough touching on each of the items. So of course, at the end, any of the questions that you might have in anything that I have covered or anything that I might have not covered, just please ask me, okay? And Claire will help me with anything, will give me right. So yeah, so bees in the UK, one of the things that we find all the time with honeybees is when we talk about the work that we do, immediately people, when they think about bees, they think about honeybees. It's very normal for me when I say that I'm the lead bee inspector for the Scottish Government. Somebody say, "Oh yeah, I have bumblebees in my garden," and it's like, well, okay, very good. So we're here. There are 260 species of bees in the UK, and honeybees is just one of them. Okay, in the UK we have around 17 species of bumblebees, and there are around 19,000 to 25,000, depending on where you read, of known species of bees in the world, and honeybees are only one of them. In the Scottish Government, and our role only covers honeybees. There is a Scottish Natural Heritage. They are responsible for all the other pollinators, okay? So why are honeybees important? So Scottish Government takes honeybee health extremely seriously, and that is the reason that they invest and they fund the honeybee health team, but also fund activities of SASA and the Scottish Rural College on honeybee health. So honeybees are very important pollinators. They are responsible for up to 1/3 of the pollination of the food and crops that we consume. Not only are they responsible for the quantity, but they are also responsible for the quality of the crops. So, for example, pollination of fruit is known that if it is done by honeybees, the fruit will be bigger and will have better conformation than if it is done by other pollinators. Honeybees are really good pollinators, and they are very polyvalent. Furthermore, honeybees, they also have a responsibility and they have an impact on the pollination of the environment, although it's quite difficult to estimate the impact that they might have. In terms of beekeeping, honey production in Scotland, Scottish honey is highly regarded. Actually, we are unable to meet the demand even internally, let alone for exporting honey. Heather honey is highly regarded across the world, and there are currently studies ongoing to try to demonstrate that heather honey actually has the same properties than Manuka honey, although obviously there are a number of issues there in terms of marketing. In terms of employment as well, they are employers across Scotland. But I would say that as we will talk later on, is a little bit less of an impact. Okay. So I wanted to tell you all with words and everything. Some of you might have come across. There are it's not all flowers and sunshine with honeybees. There is obviously a debate about the possible impact that honeybees might have on the environment and other wild pollinators. And quite recently, I don't know if you have come across it or not, but it was in the news. Mark and Spencer's were putting honeybees. There was a bit of a debate about if it was going to have a negative impact on the wild pollinators. So there has been quite a lot of studies, and I always find the most useful of them is the one from Mallinger, that actually what he does is he reviews all the literature that is regarding competition between honeybees and pollinators. The impact from honeybees in the environment can be around competition. So as I was saying, honeybees are incredibly good at what they do. So if you think that in a beehive there can be around 50,000 honeybees, if you put 10 hives in a place, obviously you're going to have there 500,000 bees that they are going to be competing for food and for nectar with all the other pollinators. They also have an important change in plant community through their activity and the preferences in pollination. They can have an impact and change the plant community in an area. And the one that we are quite interested from our side, of course, at Bees Pet Inspector, is that honeybees can act as a spillover of disease and pathogens for wild pollinators as well. So just without entering, this is as I'm saying, this is a whole presentation on itself as well. But without entering into much detail, I think that the upshot of this is that there is still a need of more research. The evidence is quite inconclusive, and if I think that it's quite clear that there is a conflict, but there are ways that it can be managed. So the way that it can be managed, obviously, is about the size of apiaries. So if we try to control high densities of apiaries in sensitive areas, about using native bees, about being conscious where areas where wild pollinators that might be endangered species are located, so untimely movement of beehives. So the biggest impact obviously has always been a concern that commercial beekeepers, that they have a large number of beehives might have a larger impact. However, what we find is that commercial beekeepers go from floration to floration, and we will talk about that in a second. So as long as they are moving them from the floration to the rapeseed oil to the floration of the heather, in reality, those bees are going to have a very limited impact on the environment. The bees are going to be focusing on those two single florations. And as I was saying, obviously, in terms of disease, it's very important for us to have healthy bees and to manage disease within those stocks. But why are bees endangered? You might all have heard, but I think that unavoidably we have to accept that as humans, we are not having a very good impact on the environment, and the impact that we are having in the environment is affecting pollinators as well as all other biodiversity. So within others, the biggest causes of the bees are suffering and all the other pollinators is because of the use of chemicals in agriculture, because intensification of agriculture. And when we talk about reasons to be keeping honeybees, it's incredible how your perception of the environment changes when you start looking at the environment. I always thought that we lived in a very green country. I live in the Scottish borders. But once that you start keeping bees, you start to realize the lack of flowers and the lack of biodiversity and plants that we have. I feel like this of grass is basically a desert for a pollinator. Pollution, climate change. In this, I've been keeping bees for 10 years, and even here in Scotland, we have been noticing significant changes in the last 10 years. We are starting to see that the winters are longer, they are wet, and they are milder, and that is having an impact on our honeybees. And obviously, deforestation and loss of habitat is having a big impact on honeybees. Okay. From our side, these are the pests that we were talking about. So there are 3 notifiable pests that we are concerning in Scotland. This is the small hive beetle. Thankfully, it's not present in the UK, but there is an incursion of it in Italy, and we have a lot of import of bees from Italy, so there is a risk that we might bring the small hive beetle into Scotland, so it's important that we remain vigilant. This is the dreaded Asian hornet. You might have heard quite a bit about it. It's now well established in Europe and in the Channel Islands, and we get now regular incursions into England. The National Bee Unit are doing a fantastic job at controlling the Asian hornet, and we really don't want to see them. Each of these things can eat around 50 insects a day, and they will not only eat honeybees, but they will eat all other pollinators. So it's really important that we keep them out. And in terms of disease, so there were 2 notifiable diseases that we have spoken before. This is American foul brood. That is a disease of the brood of honeybees. But we also have other non-notifiable diseases that are quite well spread, and they are quite common. This is a picture of sac brood. And this is, and then in terms of pests, I would say that the biggest problems that we have as beekeepers in the UK is the presence of parasite that is called Varroa destructor. And that is a parasite that was introduced into the UK just a few years, well, quite a few years back, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And that is the main reason that we are having heavy losses in our bees. And that is a photo of the Varroa in one of the honeybees. But we always say that, that the biggest killer of bees in the UK and in Scotland is the beekeepers. That's a photo of my girlfriend, by the way, with my bees. So she is not the biggest killer of bees. But yeah, as beekeepers, we are responsible for most of the bad things that happen to honeybees. So it's really important that we learn and that we educate ourselves about how to keep honeybees healthy and in an adequate manner. Okay? So just a few things about beekeeping in Scotland. So just so you're aware, because of it's kind of commonly accepted now that Varroa is extended across the whole of UK. We are really lucky here in Scotland that there are some remote area and small isolated pockets where we don't see Varroa. But where there is Varroa, it's accepted that honeybees cannot survive in the wild. So whereas you might see a wild colony of bees in a tree cavity or in a roof, and the likelihood is that they will perish within a year or 2 years. People think that they have had them for years, but in reality what happens is that colony dies and then a new colony, a new swarm comes and they live there. So the only way of survival for honeybees in Scotland is through beekeeping. So there is no real definition of what commercial beekeeping is in Scotland. I know commercial beekeepers that they call themselves commercial science, the main occupation that they have a couple of hundred hives. And I know people with more than 300 hives that they say that they are hobby beekeepers. So we usually use the number that they are registered with the Bee Farmers Association. So we usually say that there is around 25 to 30 commercial beekeepers in Scotland. Registration of beekeepers in Scotland is voluntary, but currently we have around 3,000 registered beekeepers. We don't know how many beekeepers are out there that they are not registered. The interesting thing when you look at the figures is around 50% of the colonies are owned by the commercials and 50% are owned by these 3,000 beekeepers. So that shows how large some of the commercials can be compared with the hobby beekeepers, where they tend to keep 1 or 2 hives in the back of the garden. Okay. And a very important thing for us is to remember that the large majority of beekeepers are doing this for fun or just because they are passionate about honeybees. And in my case, that's the case. Okay, I'm not interested on selling honey, although if I have a surplus, I do. But the reason that I keep bees is just because I love them. I think that they are absolutely fascinating. Another thing that is quite interesting as well is that there was a survey, and the survey reflected that over 80% of the beekeepers in Scotland are over 65 years old. And lately we have been seeing a big surge on beekeeping interest, and we think that is this thing of save the bees. And as we were saying, there is this misconfusion and that saving the bees relates to saving the honeybees, but I don't think the honeybees need saving. They are doing really well, as you will see in a second. So reality versus expectation of beekeeping in Scotland. I think that I'm not very good on Instagram, on Facebook and these type of things, but some of my friends have been sending me some of these things that come across in the news sometimes of these American beekeepers that they are handling bees. They look always fantastic, and I don't know what type of bees they are, but they are never wearing a bee suit. And so I would like to see them keeping bees like that here in Scotland. The reality here in Scotland is that it's really weather dependent. We have a very short season. As I was saying, usually goes for us inspecting bees, it goes from around May till the end of August. Most beekeepers will not open bees until sometime in April. But for example, this year, by the end of May, I'm sure that you all remember that it was absolutely freezing. So we didn't start to look at the bees until June. And it's very common for us that we are looking at bees and we need to be doing so in between showers or trying to avoid thunder and lightning. Okay. Beekeeping in Scotland, as I was saying, these are the location of apiaries from bee days. So as I was saying, I really don't think that honeybees in Scotland need saving. Honeybees, if you have been following the news, there are actually some areas in the UK that actually there are so many bees that there is not sufficient forage. There was a really good article not long ago in The Guardian where they were saying that because of the popularity of urban beekeeping in London, now there are serious problems with honeybees not having access to sufficient resources. So as you can see here in Scotland, there are high density here in Perthshire, here in the Scottish borders and Dumfries, and then around the east coast of Scotland. And it will not surprise you if I tell you that the highest density of disease is around this Perthshire area because of the density of beekeepers. Commercial beekeepers in Scotland usually have been associated to the soft fruit farming. So that area has always been around Perth and Angus, and that is where we currently do most of our work. So how does it work in Scotland? How does beekeeping? So the majority of the beekeeping is related to moving bees. Bees are, at least in terms of commercial beekeepers, hobby beekeepers, obviously they don't move bees, but commercial beekeepers, they go looking for the florations. The money for them is in the heather honey. So what they tend to do is they go to the rapeseed oil, but they are not so much looking for the honey as to a source of food and pollen for the bees to try to build them up, to have strong colonies for the summer, where they take them to the heather and they get the heather crop that commands a premium price. But obviously those bees need to come from the heather moors in the winter, so they go to somewhere in the winter for overwintering, and then back in spring they move. So that represents a number of challenges for us in terms of traceability of these bees and where they move. So if you are thinking of starting keeping bees, so I would say that the first thing that you have to think to yourself is why you want to keep bees, okay? And I think that is quite important to do so. We have seen a lot of people, and we get regular communications from people that they want to help the bees and they want to save the bees, so they want to keep a beehive in their garden. And honestly, we are really against that. You can do more damage by keeping a beehive and keeping honeybees if you are not doing it properly than if you really want to help bees and other pollinators. The best thing that you can do is to plant wildflowers, really, and a number of other things, as we have spoken before, to help with the problems that we are facing in terms of climate change, biodiversity loss, and agriculture. Okay. It's an absolute fascinating hobby, but it's not easy. It's like some people say that it is a craft and it takes years to master. I'm really against people starting beekeeping without having had any induction or training. I think that it can be dangerous for them. And we will talk later on about the possible damage that it can cause the public in terms of disease control and to the environment as well, as we have spoken. Okay, so look for some training. I will always encourage you to join the local association. Most local beekeeping associations have beginner courses, and they are really welcoming of beginners. But just a word of warning, don't be put off if you go to your local beekeeping association and for whatever reason it doesn't suit you or don't fit in. Just try another beekeeping association or another group. They are all obviously like any other club or any other group. Some might be better suited to you than others. And we find that most of around 80% of people that they take beekeeping, they tend to quit within 2 years. And I think that the reason for that is because, as I was saying, is the expectations that they have of the hobby versus the reality. So I would really encourage you, before that if you decide to take the hobby, do a course and maybe shadow a local beekeeper and try to see if it is really for you. Try to fully understand what it is involved in beekeeping. It is not as simple as leaving it in the back of your garden and just letting them be. Some basics things to know, as I was saying, I'm trying to condense here 10 years of that I, by the way, I by no means am I an expert beekeeper. My background, as I was saying, I'm a veterinary surgeon. I have been keeping bees for 10 years, and I have been doing the work in the bee inspectorate for the last 2 years. But there is so much to learn, and definitely I will not claim at this moment in time to be an expert on bees. I always say that my level is intermediate. Okay? But as a beginner beekeeper, things that you need to know and things that are going to be quite difficult for you. So swarm management. When we start keeping bees, the less I would say that at least the first 5 years are spent trying to learn to swarm management. And swarm management is basically honeybees is the natural way of reproduction. And basically what happens is that the queen bee flies away with all the flying bees in the hive, and they leave behind the nursing bees and the brood to create a new queen and to start a new colony. For the bees, it's a happy occurrence. It's the way that they reproduce. But for us as beekeepers, it's really bad news because basically we lose half of our stocks, and the hive will most likely not produce any honey for the year. But furthermore, as I will cover later, it has implications for the public. It has implications for disease control. So it's really bad practice to let your bees swarm. Beekeeping can be really heavy work, so it's something that you need to keep in mind if you're going to start beekeeping. Are you able to lift the boxes? A box of honey can weigh up to, depending on what type of hive you have, it can weigh up to 25 kilos. So when you are thinking about where you are going to put your apiary and how you are going to manage your bees, it's something that you need to have into consideration. What is your physical ability to do that? But I can tell you that the first time that I went with the bee inspectors, we were faced with 100 hives, each of them with 3 or 4 supers of 25 kilos of honey. At the end of the day, I was thinking if this job was for me or not. Stings and reactions. Obviously, if you haven't been stung before by a bee, but it hurts, and some people can have anaphylactic reactions. Anaphylactic reactions are very, very rare, but they can develop with time. So it's important that you test yourself, that you get stung a couple of times, you decide if you are comfortable with getting stung, and you check how much you are reacting to bee stings. It is kind of unavoidable getting stung. Today's bee suits are really good. We tend to select bees for their temperament. So we have very docile bees, certainly not like those ones in YouTube that you can be without a bee suit. yeah, just something to have in mind as well. It's a hobby that can be quite expensive as well. I have a couple of slides later on with some detail in the pricing, but yeah, it's like any other hobby. I like running, I like cycling, and I will say that beekeeping is in part with any of those hobbies. Okay. Honey is delicious. But it's really sticky and it's a mess. So you need to have the facilities and you need to be prepared to deal with it. As I was saying, I absolutely love my bees, but I hate dealing with the honey. I love eating the honey, but I really dislike every time that I have to deal with the honey. And if I'm honest, my girlfriend hates it even more. We live in a flat, and every time that I start extracting honey, my girlfriend just gets out of the house. So yeah, can be quite challenging. So make sure that if you're going to have to do beekeeping, you have the facilities to do so. So yeah, you need some knowledge, you need to have disease management, and obviously, as I have said, one of the biggest challenges that we have as beekeepers is Varroa management as well. So you need to learn how to manage Varroa, how to do it properly, how to do it legally, because we are using medication for livestock. Okay. That's just some thoughts. But if you want to start with bees and equipment, this is just we did a very rough estimate for. Claire will be talking about some grants available for crofting. So we did a project, we did a paper, and we did some figures. This is really rough estimate. Okay. So this is obviously from the point of view of just a hobby beekeeper, just starting, but it's some rough idea of what the costs are involved into keeping bees. We always recommend to beekeepers, if they are going to start keeping bees, to start with 2 hives. And that is because it gives you the flexibility to fix some problems. If, for example, you kill the queen, which is not unusual during your bee inspection, or something happened to the queen, if you don't have another beehive that has a queen and you don't have some eggs to be able to fix the problem, you will be quite snooker, and the only option available for you will be to buy a new queen. So having two beehives allows you to play a bit and to fix some of the common problems that we see as beekeepers. So as I was saying as well, the other thing that you need to think is the swarm management, and swarm is one of the most common issues that you're going to have to deal with. And most of the methods for swarm management involve splitting a hive. So that means that if you have 1 hive, when you are doing the swarm management, you will end up with 2 hives. So if you have 2 hives, you will end up with 4 hives. So that involves that you need equipment for double the number of hives that you have. At the end of the year, you can unite them, but what we find as a beekeeper is that it's a wee bit of a drag, and you are always expanding until it becomes kind of unmanageable. And my 2 beehives at one point 2 years ago became 15. And yeah, I was spending my evenings running around trying to look at my bees, and my girlfriend gave me an ultimatum. I'm not sure that I made the right choice, but yeah, I only have 6 beehives now. So those are some prices and things that you are going to need. So you're going to need your beehive, you're going to need smokers, you're going to need bee suit. I would say to you, you can find bee suits in Amazon for around £50. Do it at your own risk. Okay, when I started beekeeping, I bought one of those bee suits, and I got stung in the face, and in many other places. You get what you pay for. So I would strongly recommend you that you buy the best bee suits that you can find around. It will make your hobby way more enjoyable, and you feel safer, and you will feel more confident. So my personal advice is, please don't be too tight when you are buying something that is going to save you from it's going to be quite important for your safety. Okay. Obviously, if you are going to be extracting honey, unless you only have 1 beehive and you can be crushing the honey and then filtering, but as I say, it's quite a mess. You're going to need an extractor. There is a variety of factors here that are going to be talking later on as well, if we have time, but it really depends what honey you are going to be dealing with. For example, you need to learn how to handle each type of honey. So for example, rapeseed honey can set very quick in the comb. You might not be able to extract it unless you have heating facilities. And heather honey, for example, doesn't extract in a normal extractor. It needs special equipment because it's really dense. It's like a gel. Okay, so these are the type of things that you will need to learn and decide. And obviously, I have put there the caveat that this is for hobby beekeepers. If you are thinking of doing this as a commercial enterprise, we are talking of a completely different proposition. And then you need to start thinking about having vehicles, about extraction facilities, marketing, and so forth. The Bee Farmers Association are really good at helping people that they want to make the move to commercial beekeeping. So I would encourage anybody that is thinking of doing beekeeping as a commercial enterprise to get in touch with the Bee Farmers Association. So a couple more things, just if you are going to start keeping bees, things that we always advise, get local bees from a reputable source. There is a lot of money to be made by selling bees, and unfortunately we see sometimes that there are undesirable advertisement at times from people that we would prefer that they were not doing what they are doing, or they are false advertising some products. So just get to know your local beekeepers, get the bees from them. Local bees are going to be adapted to your area, your particular climate, and you are going to be avoiding importing disease from to your area from other areas where there might be more disease. A plea for all of you, as I was saying, registration of beekeepers in bee base is in the UK is voluntary at the moment. We are currently considering if we should make it compulsory, but it's really, really important. So please, it's the responsible thing to do. We cannot control disease if we don't know where the bees are. When we find disease in an area, we need to know bees can fly for up to 5 kilometers. So we need to know all the beekeepers that are within the 5 kilometers of the infection area, so we can check that disease hasn't spread to them. If you are not registered, we don't know that you are there, so we cannot help you. We always say to anyone starting keeping bees, get a mentor. Is one of the most important things that you are going to find, but I have put there a caveat. Be aware of mentors, as I was saying before. Make sure that you find one that suits you, that you work well with them. And yes, beekeepers, 99%, they are lovely people. We have met some of the most fantastic people that I have met has been through beekeeping. But unfortunately, there are some people out there that you might not get on with them, and they might think that they know way more than they really do. So just be careful with that. Okay, so that's some prices of what you can expect to pay for some bees. And then obviously what you are going to be getting from your bees. You're going to be getting some honey. And as I was saying, it's quite important that you learned that honey can be quite different depending of the type of flowers that they have been foraging in. This was my first year keeping bees, and so this was my setup for honey, which was very not professional. It's a very small frames, and I was using a heat gun for uncap the honey, and this is it. And that's the honey that I produce. And most of it goes just for friends and family, and if there is a bit of a surplus, I put it in the local shop with the objectives that it's for the hobby. Obviously, there's no money to be made. I'm realizing that I'm taking too long, so I'm going to speed up a bit. Other things that you might be getting from the bees, pollen and propolis. It's not very common here in Scotland. I haven't seen many people taking pollen and propolis, but they are products as well that you might come across. And other people are making some money through selling wax, for example, making candles, making wax paper. You can make some honey products like mead or flavor honeys. And as I was saying, there are people that currently make way much more money by selling bees than by selling honey. So it can be way more profitable to sell bees and colonies than to extract the honey. And if you are like me, that you hate extracting honey and dealing with honey, this is a very good option to kind of fund your hobby. But there is also a lot of people now that they are making money about doing courses on beekeeping and providing beekeeping experiences for schools and for people that they want to start keeping bees. And I have used this term as well, greenwashing, although I know that it's a little bit derogatory. But it is a fact that there is a number of beekeepers now that they are profiting for this as well. There are companies that they are getting carbon points for keeping bees in, so they call local beekeepers, and they pay them a fee to keep bees in their company or their business. Okay, so just some data about honey. Very, very difficult. I really admire people that try and make a living by keeping bees. Overall, with Scotland, very unpredictable. It's very short season, and production can change from year to year. Depending where you are, it is completely usual for us that we hear one beekeeper 1 year saying to us that they have had a terrible year, and somebody 50 miles away are saying that they have had the best year that they have ever had. It depends on the nectar yields of plants. We have seen many years bees next to fields of rapeseed oil completely in bloom, and bees starving because they didn't have sufficient food because the rapeseed oil was not producing nectar. So it's something to be mindful of. But averages, normally we say this is very, very difficult to estimate. There are no official figures. There used to be a survey done by the British Beekeepers and by the Bee Farmers Association, but that seems to have stopped. So the average really is depending between hobbies and commercial. But yeah, usually those are the rough figures that we tend to see the production of per hive. So there are many hobbies that they will be not producing any honey, and there could be a few that they can produce up to 100 tons in weight of honey. This is really changed from people that they are selling it in bulk to people that they are selling it in parts in the local shop. It really depends. I have seen absolutely extortionate prices of honey in the Royal Mile for the Pests, and then that obviously is not comparable to a commercial beekeeper that is selling his honey in bulk by the ton to a honey dealer. Okay, so very difficult, but those are some figures for you just to get an idea. So just trying to give you an idea, we're nearly reaching the end, about the legal framework and some things that you need to know about regulations about bees if you're thinking about keeping bees. So the main, I have divided it in three in terms of bee health, disease, pests, and inspections. So those are the two pieces of legislation that we work with. And basically those pieces of legislation, what it says is that it's a legal requirement that you suspect to have one of the two notifiable diseases of honeybees or any of the notifiable pests, that you have a requirement to call us, the bee inspectors. It gives us powers for inspection, it gives us powers for servicing of notices, and I'm sure that you are aware with any other livestock industry. In terms of honey, there are regulations as well. Obviously, it's a food product. So, and the Honey Scotland regulations and the food labeling regulations, they state the standards for labeling of honey and what can you do and what can you advertise as honey. I'm sure that you are aware, honey is one, we attended food crime talk, and honey is one of the biggest, it's one of the foods that is to the biggest fraud worldwide. There is a lot of money to be made made by making froth with honey, and unfortunately the testing methods that we have are very limited, and it's very difficult to recognize honey froth. There is a wide variety to provide honey froth, from mixing the honey with syrup, feeding the bees with sugar and water, so you can produce something that is not the quality product that we as consumers are expecting. So one of the advices that one of the pleas that I will do to you today is that if you want to help with honeybees and you want to help local beekeepers, is find your local beekeeper, buy local honey, try to avoid the very honey that is imported, and that is I will kind of assure you that that is not the quality honey that you can buy from Scotland and from a local beekeeper.
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch a wee bit on the crofting grant side of things, and what's eligible for a grant under the current CAG scheme. So the bees themselves wouldn't be eligible for a grant, but the beekeeping equipment, so the beehives and the physical hives, would be eligible. So as we've said there, it's the kind of the same rules that apply for all of the CAGs. So it's a rate of 60% for MD over 41, and 80% for MD under 41. You must be a registered croft, and you must crucially have an agricultural justification. So if you're planning on just getting a couple of hives for your own hobby and giving your honey to friends and families, then that's not going to be eligible for the CAGs grant. Like everything under CAGs, you need to have an agricultural output. So it's the same with bees. So if you had a market outlet for it, if you were selling products, for example, honey, candles, bees, all of these would make you eligible for a CAGs grant. If you've never submitted a CAGs grant before, we might also ask you to submit a business plan, and as part of the contract, we might put in a special condition that you must have obtained bees and be producing a product within a specific time frame, as we do with other aspects of the CAG scheme. Our policy team are currently making up a replacement to the CAG scheme. We don't know when that's coming out yet, but under the new scheme, there's going to be a more kind of tailored package targeted towards beekeeping specifically, and there'll be more kind of things in that package that would be eligible for a grant. But at the moment, it's just the physical beehives themselves that would be eligible.
Folks, I was going to say, if anybody has any further questions or anything comes to mind in the next few days or so, please by all means drop us an email, and I can go back to Claire or Luis on your behalf and present any questions. The presentation will be available. I'll be able to send that out, folks, to everybody that was on tonight's call, and it'll also be available from the FAS Advisory website at a slightly later date. It'll probably be a few days before it's on online. But folks, if there's nothing else to add, no more questions, I would just like to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for your time. Thank you to Claire and Luis as well for speaking for us. And I don't have a date of our next meeting yet, but as soon as I do, we'll send it out over email to everyone. It'll be advertised on the Farm Advisory website as well. So folks, thank you so much for dialing in tonight, and do enjoy the rest of your evening. And hopefully we'll see you and speak to you all soon. Thank you.